Hi, everybody. Welcome tonight. I'm TK Kugler, founder, managing partner at Wasabi Venture Stables. And tonight we have a really great guest, somebody who I consider a friend and somebody who I think is changing the game as well. And that's our man, Jose Santos Jr. And we're gonna jump right in. And tonight we're gonna hopefully be here about an hour. My man's going to answer a handful of questions, probably more than a handful by the time we get through this. But if you have any questions, anything that you might want to get covered that you think I didn't get to, feel free to put it in the chat window, chat button at the bottom. Everybody's muted, so we don't have any background noise. But let's just jump right in. Once again, and thanks for coming out tonight, Jose. It's great to have you. We were just reminiscing before we started this. I haven't seen you in person in quite a while. So COVID and all that excitement keeps us apart. But let's jump right in and talk a little bit about your background. How did you get into the racing game? How did you want to make this a career? What was the impetus and how did that happen?
I was born into racing, on both sides of my family. My dad was a jockey. He's got three brothers that were jockeys. His dad was a jockey. On my mom's side, her dad's a jockey and her brother was a jockey. So, horse racing's it's been in my family for well before me. And first time I ever went to the track, I was 6 days old, so I was in it right from the beginning. And I always knew I wanted to work in racing. I didn't know what that would be. Of course, when I was younger, I wanted to be a jockey, but as time went on, I'm like 5'10", so no riding any horses for me. But I always liked the handicapping aspect of it. I learned how to read a racing form like really young. When I was like 4 years old, I could read a racing form. So I was always into the handicapping and trying to figure out horses off the numbers. And I like math a lot as well. And when I was 14 years old, my dad was an agent in Delaware for Fernando O'Hara. And he wasn't really good at reading the condition book, but I had learned how to read the condition book just, over time hanging out at the track. So I would take notes on horses for him to go ask for, and then he'd ask for the horses and they'd win. And, I got to watch it all happen. He would give me some money for doing it. I was like, wow, this is awesome. So when I turned 16, I got my agent's license at Calder. I worked for a guy named Eddie Dominguez down there for 2 summers, like when I was off in high school. And then I moved up to Kentucky to play soccer at Bellarmine University. And, I was 3 miles from Churchill, and it wasn't long. I was an agent over there full time in Kentucky, So when I turned 19, I became an agent full time, and I'm on my 9th year of doing it now.
And so at that tipping point at 16, you get your agent's license. And we'll come back to that because understanding how licensing works is interesting on this. But when you had that tipping point, did you think at 16, hey, this is my career path, or did you think this was I'm going to do this and then do something else in racing? How did you think about that?
Well, I definitely thought it was my career path. I'd say once I saw my dad do it, and I grew up around a lot of great agents, guys that my dad had, or other riders that I know well since I was young had. So I've always had a lot of respect for, the top guys. And, I always had a lot of interest in it. So pretty much since I was 14, I knew this is what I was going to do.
Gotcha. And so you mentioned licensing. So what does getting an agent's license look like? How did that process? And you were only 16. So how did that work? What was the steps? How did you
First off, I had to be 16. So I got it shortly after my birthday, which is coming up in a few days. And so it was like this time, and I had to take a test. And it was like a 10-question test, pretty much just about like how many calls you can give out in a race, how weights work, a lot of just racing office questions that, you would need to know about entering horses, how to properly enter a horse and such. So after I passed the test, the steward just signed off on it, and I was able to get licensed.
Yeah. And was that first license in Florida or in Kentucky?
Florida.
Okay. Cause you said Calder. So
yeah.
I saw your social media post on Calder. Just makes you unhappy. So
well, Calder, it's really important to my family. When my dad came to America, he landed at Calder, and my grandfather moved to America as well on my mom's side to ride at Calder. So, on both sides of my family, Calder's always been super important. And it's not just me, it's a lot of people. I mean, Alex Solis landed there first.
Yep.
Luis Saez came to America through Calder. A lot of people come through Calder because from South America to Miami, it's the easiest transition. And then, you know, they'd go on from there, but it had a lot of history. Sad to see, though.
Yep. Yep. So you end up in Kentucky. You're going to college, right? I mean, you're thinking about, I'm going to go to college. Was there ever a moment in that you didn't think you were going to go back and be an agent full time? I mean, you know, a lot of kids go to college and then they're like, okay, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to go get the degree and I'm going to go off and do something else.
Right.
Did that ever cross your mind? Was there ever the path? I guess I'm asking the question of, what was the path you didn't take if you'd have stayed in a normal college student?
My degree was going to be in broadcast communication. That's what I went to school for. But I really went over there to play soccer, you know, and to get to Kentucky. I wanted to be in Kentucky because, you know, I knew I wanted to be in horse racing. That was the place to be. And, you know, year-round racing in Florida, it's improved a lot now. But when I was younger, it died off pretty heavily. And I don't know. I never really thought I would do anything else because I knew that's what I was interested in. And it didn't take long for me to, you know, end up doing it anyway. So pretty much once I got there, I played that first year of soccer at Bellarmine and I stopped playing after that. And once I was done playing soccer, I immediately was trying to get into it.
Gotcha. And so after that first year of school, what jock was your first client that you said, hey, I think I can actually make a career of this because I'm good at this, because I've got a jock that I work really well with? Who was that jock and how did that sort of happen for you?
So the way I got started was Nelson Arroyo, who's Norberto Arroyo's brother. He helped me out get a rider named Aldo Quinchano, and we were doing really good at Turfway, and he got hurt, and I picked up DDL Osorio, and we did really well together as well. We went to Oakland, did really well. He wanted me at Ellis, but the first person who probably made it like this is going to be a sustainable career for me was David Cabrera. You know, when I got hooked up with him, that's when I stopped going to college, because like he invited me to go to Iowa, and what I was doing was I'd spend the winters in Arkansas and I'd go back to school in the fall time in Kentucky, and I would work, you know, the Kentucky circuit, and I was at the University of Louisville at that point, and it's like directly across the street from the track. So I had my schedule worked out where you know, I could just go to school and then come back and go to the racetrack when I needed to be there. But when David offered me the opportunity with him, you know, in Iowa, after we had a really good meet in 2018 in Arkansas, it was, you know, in my scenario, the dream job that I wanted, and I went for it. And it's been, you know, I can make a career out of it for sure ever since that moment.
I think that's a perfect segue place to start to think about and tell the story of and explain to people, what does a jockey agent do? I mean, we're all familiar, even racing fans. I mean, we're very familiar with what a sports agent does in general. You know, there's been movies about it. Everybody gets that. Explain a little bit about what the job, and I want you to explain this question in generic terms about what a jockey agent does, less so about your business, because your business is sort of, and we'll get to that, is almost different. But talk to us a little bit about, what does a jockey agent's, what is their job? What do they do?
So you're scheduling the workers in the morning for the rider, as well as taking calls. Like in the book, as you know, they got the condition book for what races are going to be run on certain days. You get in contact with trainers about certain horses to ride in those races, or they'll get in contact with you, and just making sure all that's organized for the rider. And that's pretty much what the job entails. You know, a lot of going around in the morning and asking for, you know, horses with your riders. You maybe walking around with them and, you know, trying to hustle up new business. So that's pretty much what it entails. And the entries as well. Like we have most of it's a Zoom draw, but there are live draws as well, where they'll actually like draw the races, and we're on for that as well to make sure all our horses got in and everything went smoothly.
How much of your job, or the job of an agent, is proactive and how much is reactive? And what I mean by that is, how much it is it you calling a trainer and saying, listen, this horse should be in this race and I think my jock should ride for it, And how much is it that the trainer calling you saying, hey, I'm entering this horse in this race. Do you want to ride? What's the percentage there and how does that happen?
I think you definitely got to go after horses a lot more than they're going to come to you. Like your main clients are always going to let you know where you're at. Uh, but if you're trying to hustle a specific horse that you see, you're going to be open in that race, you see a live opportunity for a horse, you're going to have to go after that horse yourself because, there's a lot of options, So the way I see it, you want to step in front of that. If you see a horse that you think's got a good shot to win, it's going to work out for each other, you got to attack it, or it could go to anybody.
Mm-hmm. How many condition books, and this is getting down into your specific business, how many condition books are you looking at on a given day? How many different tracks, how many different books are you thinking about?
4 circuits, generally 4 to 5 circuits.
Mm-hmm. And how far out in that proactive work that we talked about are you looking? Are you mostly next week? Is it 3 weeks? How are you thinking about it?
Each circuit's very different. In somewhere like Kentucky, I'm doing 2 to 3 weeks out. Places like Indiana, it's a week out. Texas, a lot of it's like a week to days before. It's the same with Iowa, a week to days before. And the horses in Kentucky, the races are just spaced out more because the pots are bigger. Where in a place like Iowa or Texas, in Indiana, you have to run more often, to make money. That's just the way that it's set up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little more day to day there because you got to see what races didn't go, what did. In Kentucky, you can kind of like point towards a race. That race is going to go. This is what we're doing. Where you kind of got to watch the extras at some of the other racetracks.
How many jocks does a typical agent work with? How does that usually work?
Usually it's like 2 to 3 based on whatever the jurisdiction's rules are. Each state has different rules. In Kentucky, for instance, you can have 2 jockeys, whether it be 2 journeymen, 2 apprentices, or a journeyman and an apprentice. In a place like Oklahoma, for instance, you can have 3 riders. It doesn't matter what they are, between being journeymen or all apprentices. And in a place like Indiana, you can have 2 journeymen and only 1 apprentice. So, you just got to know the rules at each place, but generally it's 2 to 3.
Mm-hmm. And, just to start to give people a difference on yours, how many jocks are you currently an agent for?
Currently 7. 7 riders.
Yes. Right. And just so everybody understands, that's part of why I wanted to make sure he was on is that there really isn't anyone else thinking about 7 jocks all at the same time and doing such a great job still at it. So, and we'll delve into, how you're able to do that for sure. How do you get a new jock? Do you have a target list that you're thinking, sooner or later, I'm going to go get jock X and I'm going to start working to get him now? Or how does your mindset go with that? How do you get that relationship?
Most definitely. I'm just constantly going through the rider standings at places, I'd say about once a month, just check in on what's going on everywhere and see if there'd be an opportunity for me to start working with a rider where it'd be beneficial to both of us. And whether that be bringing that rider to a circuit they haven't been prior, or me going to a circuit I haven't been prior. I'd like to explore both avenues, and I have in the past, and it's worked out pretty well thus far.
Mm-hmm. How, being at the stage that you're at now, which is a little different than when you just started, how often are you now having a jock pitch you instead of you having to pitch the jock?
I'd say definitely a lot more often. I definitely get a lot of phone calls about, situations, riders wanting to make changes, or people know a rider wanting to make a change. And, if I'm not the right answer, I try to direct them to someone I think is. I think I don't want to just take on people and not do well for them. If I'm going to take on a rider, I want there to be a plan, because, if I'm successful, they're going to be successful. And, it can only help, my clients, the trainers wise that I work with, as well as the riders. So,
mm-hmm.
But definitely I get a good amount of phone calls.
I would think, man. Yeah, it's part of doing a good job that makes that happen. So it's a lot easier when you're doing a good job for them to call you instead of you to call them all the time. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah. So explain a little bit about how a jockey agent gets paid? Who pays you? How does that
Okay,
work?
yeah. So it's from the jockey. At the end of the week, the jockey's going to get a check from the racetrack, and whatever their check is for, the agent makes 25%. Now, some agents get 30%. I know quite a bit of agents who get 30%, but most of the time it's 25. I charge 25 because I've got a lot of riders. I don't think it'd probably be right for me to be charging 30% to a rider, but I try to do my absolute best for all of them, and stay on the computer and stay busy. And I've got a team of people who help me as well, with organizing things and going through charts. So I think we do just as good of a job as anybody.
How do you have a written contract with each jockey, or how does that work?
No, there is no written contracts, but at some racetracks they have contracts that you have to write out at the track. So like in Oklahoma and Texas, you have to sign like a jockey agent jockey agreement, so that if there's ever like issues with the pay or anything like that, the racetrack holds them accountable.
Do any of the racetracks, because I know we run into this and have this with certain tracks, do any of the tracks now pay you directly your cut, or does it always come from the
No,
jockey?
it always comes from the rider.
Okay, because like some states now they take the trainer numbers, the dollars,
Right,
bonuses,
yeah.
right out. Yeah. So I didn't know if they had done that on the jockey side or not.
No, they had not.
Yeah. So would you, and this is a hypothetical question, and feel free to tell me, I have no idea and I don't want to answer it. But if you had a jockey that you really wanted, would you negotiate a different type of contract with them? Would that even cross your mind, or how would you think about that?
I would honestly have to think about it based off whatever the situation was, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I know you're just such a progressive thinker.
Right.
I was wondering if you had ever thought of that. So
I guess in the right situation, possibly.
Yeah. What percentage of and it's a question from Jenny Brown. What percentage of jocks don't have any agent?
It's not many, and unfortunately, usually it doesn't lead to much success. It's just trainers, it's tough to get a hold of a rider at all times. They're going to be in the jocks room, or riders, they're busy themselves maintaining weight and having a family life as well, so usually it doesn't work out very often, or one of those riders is kind of looking for an agent at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been my experience too. The only places I've ever seen it really work are really small circuits with a jockey.
I'm sure it works somewhere.
Where
if I was a rider, I'd love to have been my own agent.
Yeah, I bet.
That'd have been cool.
Yeah, that's the case. So, this is another question. Bob McKinley asked this, and I think it's a good question. Coming back to that proactive or reactive, if you had a jock, do you ever think about your jocks and how you sell that specific jock to a specific trainer for a specific horse? Does that cross your mind? Like, do you have jockeys that you think, and you may not say it out loud, but you may think, I think this jock is actually a better fit for you than my other jock? How do you think about that? Do you sell them that way?
No, I not really. Like, if a rider will tell me multiple times, like, I don't think I fit that horse, then I'll ask for my other rider to ride them. But I try to keep I want to keep the riders' business separate. They all have their own careers, so I'm trying to manage their specific career to my best ability.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like as much of like everyone gets along and they're all a team. Like, and hopefully, one person's business can feed off the others is the idea. Because you can't always ride every horse, but if they want to keep it all together and continue to maybe get back to that other rider, it just works out to where I can sell my rider first to them. But I do my best to like treat them all as an individual, because they are, it's about their career. That's what I'm hired for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you and I want to delve into how your business is different and how you're thinking about the business. And my first question is, I heard you answer the question about how sort of what you do and what most jock agents do. Do you provide any services that are not directly related to racing? And I'm thinking more like, in sports agents, they may be working all kinds of other deals. is there anything that you're involved with your jocks that isn't directly related to the horses they're going to get on?
Not as of right now, but I definitely want to.
Okay. I was
Yeah,
gonna,
definitely thinking towards that direction.
yeah, because I was wondering, it's actually a question I didn't know the answer to. Because I actually have some, we'll talk offline, but I actually got some creative ideas there for you that I think you might find useful, but we'll talk about that one offline. So the another question that's kind of related to that, we talked about it already. You have 7 sort of jocks that you're representing now, and the average agent's got 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You know, that's kind of the go, and they work one circuit at a time. When did you make the decision, and what forced you to make that, or what compelled you to make the decision to say, hey, I can rethink this and still be highly effective for my clients and in this job? What was the thought process for changing this?
I would do my work as in depth as I possibly could when I was only working one circuit, and I just had a lot of time still on my hands. So it was always in my mind, like, I want to do it this way. And the first time I did it that way was at right before COVID started. I was working in Kentucky with Alex Kinchari, and I had Miguel at the fairgrounds. So I was working 2 circuits. And then when COVID started and everything went on these Zoom calls, I was like, all right, now is my chance where I could really step on it. But I'm not like in Europe, this is the way it's done. Like agents have multiple riders that ride all over at the different tracks. And, so it's not like my model per se, but it just hasn't been done here for whatever reason. I would say the reason is how everything used to be. So, being in an office, all the information was right there. But now that we've gone to these Zoom draws, and, I think everybody sees the benefit to it as well. Just not just me, but even trainers can be there, watching a Zoom draw. It's anybody can be on there and, get the information that needs to be given. So when that happened, it was able to speed up for me. And fortunately, everyone started off doing really well, and it helps us, moving forward, and gave it a good name. And, hopefully we can just keep doing a good job for everybody.
Yeah, no, that's great. And how much did COVID force you into that? Do you think you would have been able to do this if COVID didn't happen?
No, I don't.
Yeah. Because I mean, so much of what I experience with jock agents is so much in person. I think COVID opened people's eyes.
I could have like handled the business for the riders, but the issue is missing the draws.
Yeah.
I could have done it on maybe 2 circuits at a time, but there's no way I would have been able to do 4 circuits at one time the way I'm able to do now. And I still have room to expand that.
Yep. Totally. Speaking of regulation, I got a question that's always on everybody's mind. Holly asks, how has HISA impacted your job? And if it has or hasn't, how do you think it might impact it in the future?
Yeah, I've seen no change to it thus far. Unless they like made a rule where you couldn't, represent people at multiple circuits, then that'd be an issue. But that'd be kind of like telling these trainers that they can only run at one circuit. They couldn't ship around and run their horses at multiple different places. So I really don't see that happening. So long as I stay in the regulations of what each state allows, there's no issue.
Do you see, did you have to register with HISA as do jock agents have
Yes.
as a,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. I'm registered under HISA.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought you fell into that compelled to be registered bucket. Yes. Yeah, I haven't really seen a whole lot change except for a whole bunch of paperwork. That's about the only thing I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's really changed on my end.
Yeah, it's kind of what I've experienced as well. How this is a question from Bob. How much input does the jockey have in choosing his mounts? How much? And a part B to that is, how much is it the two of you collaborating on which mounts? So really 2 parts to that question.
If I have a question rider wise, like if I'm not sure which one I would pick, I've got no problem asking my rider. And if they say, you pick, then I'm just going to go ahead and pick. But I'm 99% of the mounts that they ride, I'm the one picking the mounts. I don't ask unless I really feel like I need to ask.
Gotcha. Gotcha. How, yeah. And
We'll talk like business ideas together, like where we should go next, barns we should go after, but the specifics of riding a certain horse, it's
mhm.
rarely a discussion.
How often does the thought process come into, I've got trainer X, he's got a big barn, but in this particular race, there's no way he's got the best horse, and I can have the mount with the best horse, but instead I'm going to choose the trainer with the big barn because that way I know I'm going to get some more mounts that will be good. How do you think about that? How do you do the calculus?
Yeah, it's just kind of knowing the vibe of what's going on in the relationship. If a trainer's good with that and they're happy to let you off, then as long as you handle it in a decent time, that could be a good thing. But you just kind of have to know the feel of, it's reading people. Is this gonna, you don't want to upset somebody or offend them, somebody, especially somebody who's helping you out to that degree, putting you on a bunch of live horses all the time. You want to try to keep the barn as happy as possible, but you just kind of got to know the person.
Yeah, which is a great thing. Are there certain trainers, and I don't want you to name specifics, but are there certain trainers where you look and say, you know what, I just don't professionally like working with them, and I'm not going to put my jocks on them. Does that factor in to your calculus at
No,
all?
not
No.
really. I don't have a person that I wouldn't want to ride a horse for so long. It all worked out just off their personality or anything like that. I think we're all just trying to do as good of a job as possible, and
Mhm.
try to join the game as well. Horse racing, it's my favorite thing to do. I have the greatest job. I feel I get to go to the racetrack every day, hang out with horses, and then watch racing all day. Like it doesn't get any better. So I like to think most of us think that way. Everybody's got bad days, of course, but I've never encountered a situation where someone was so rude to me or anything like that where I didn't want to work with them. And hopefully people feel the same way about me.
Do you here's another question that's sort of a follow-up to it, and once again, I don't want you to name names. Are there trainers that you look at and you visit their barn and say, listen, I'm not going to let my jock ride for them because I just don't trust their training? I mean, do you have those situations at all?
Not really. I mean, I rarely see anything that's that atrocious, and usually, if it is, hopefully the racetrack's rectified it by then. The regulations have gotten really, there's vets on the backside, and there's people paying attention to what people are going on, what people are doing. So
Mhm.
you really don't see too many situations where you feel horses are being mistreated, and if I did, I wouldn't want to see that for sure.
Yep. Yep. Do you, here's a question from Denise, and full disclosure, Denise is my mom. But for Denise, at a circuit like Kentucky, or let's say you're at Churchill, how many jock agents are representing the jockey colony there? Yeah, about how many?
I think there's like 18 agents over there.
Mhm. And
15 to 18, yeah, I'd say.
15 to 18.
Yeah, a lot of the agents in Kentucky only have one rider.
Gotcha.
Yeah, a lot of them do. Like, there's some cases that it's not that way. Jake Romans has Martin Garcia and Joe Talamo, and Tyler's agent Matt Musiker. He's got Tyler and Ricardo Santana. But outside of that, most of the agents there just have one rider. Liz Moore, she's got two. She's got Adam Beschizza and Gabe Saez. But in most cases, they just have one rider there.
Yeah. The if you spend time on the backside, you run into the agent, and the proverbial agent is a guy. He's got the book. He's got the book. He's making the rounds. He's got a cell phone, and he makes the rounds in the morning. Right. And you do some of that too. I've seen you do it, and that's a chunk of the job. But you have thought about the business. Once again, we talked about, you've got 7 jocks that you're doing that across a couple circuits, a handful of circuits. And so how, and you alluded to it, how do you changed yourself into Santos Inc. You literally became a company instead of just a guy with a book and he's making the rounds. What does your support staff look like to allow you to execute like that? How many people are part of Santos Inc? Not
Four.
counting the jockey, of course.
Four.
Four.
Yep.
Gotcha. And what are those other three people doing?
List of, daily list of claims that have happened, list of horses, I'll tell them trainers that I ride for, list of horses that they've ran recently to send to me. I can look them up. But, it's kind of like information gathering. The tedious part that, like, a lot of people could do if they know the information to do, and then I can sort that information. It's what speeds it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I've got a guy whose job is just to send me overnights and stake nominations right when they come out.
Gotcha. So it's actually a group of people, lack of a better word, data gatherers for you.
Yes.
Yep. And so they're putting it together, they're compiling it, and that becomes
and then I sort it from there.
Yep. Yeah, you could use some software, my friend. That would change the world for you. It might change the world.
There's a lot of judgment calls though that, like, I need to figure out how software would get that done.
Yeah.
But there are some judgment calls involved in it, to where, especially they're all people who know what's going on in the industry as well.
Yep.
Where they are knowledgeable, and their opinions, it's important.
You talked about it before, and I think this goes to that opinions thing. You liked the handicapping side of this, when you're a kid, and that was kind of what you gravitated to. Do you still handicap yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was looking at the Saratoga. I'm in Saratoga right now. I was looking at the card for tomorrow on my flight up here.
All right. Well, I can guarantee you on our group tomorrow, we'll have a whole bunch of handicapping going on tomorrow.
Awesome.
With Saratoga happening. So we were just right before the call reminiscing a colonial bad beat. But yeah, coming back to the business side, we it's a question from Clarence, and it's a good one because I don't know the answer to this either. You often see jockeys have sponsors on their pants. Who negotiates those deals for them?
Usually Angie Stevens, Gary Stevens' wife.
No kidding. Okay.
Yeah, she's really big in that. She's worked, I guess, in advertisement in the past, and she gets most of the riders the deals that they get.
Interesting. So very centralized. It sounds like. No kidding.
Yeah, no, she does a great job as well. I mean, she handles all the paperwork, and she's every rider I've ever had that worked with her on a sponsorship's been extremely happy.
Which great question. Segueing off of that, what's next for Santos Inc? I mean, you've in a very short period of time, made crazy great strides and sort of changing the way this business is done. What's next? What's on the vision for you?
I want to get into bringing apprentices into America and setting them up in different places, but like having a mentor with them as well. Like, for instance, if I could send a rider to Florida to be with my father, and he can kind of guide them through the process and all that. And there's a lot of ex-riders out there with a lot of knowledge who, unfortunately, as time gone on, like, they don't have anything to do at the moment. And, the agent game's not always easy, especially with the language barrier. And, just try to take them into some mentorship. I think it'd be a really good opportunity for younger kids coming to America who, they don't know anything going into it. You're here alone. It's scary. So if you could have somebody like that by your side who's done it before and knows what's going on, I think it'd be a huge help on both ends. And I'd also like to get into like management of like stables as well.
Gotcha. Interesting. Those are good segues. Do you think about and do you spend any time with your jockeys, and it's probably a case by case basis, with them outside of racing? Do you think about their lives and how, do you think about, like, I'll give you an example. If you had a jock that struggled to make weight, would you pair them with a dietitian or a trainer? Do you think about that aspect?
Yeah, if that's something that they tell me that's an issue, like, and if they want my help, I'll absolutely do whatever they need me to do. If they feel they can confide that in me, I'm gonna do it for them.
Mm-hmm. Do you the jockey, and I think we covered this a little bit. The jockey that you've been an agent for the longest is David.
David.
David,
Yeah, David Cabrera. Yep.
David Cabrera. And how many years have you been with David now?
We were together all of 2018. We were not together in 2019, and then from 2020 on, we've been back together.
Yep. If what's how do you, somebody that you've had sort of a longer term working relationship with, do you find that your discussions, and it's probably on a case by case basis, but do you think about his business, and especially somebody like David Cabrera, do you think about his business differently, and like what's next for him? Did those discussions happen? Do you think about that?
I think I have a pretty good understanding of each one of my riders' goals, just based off speaking to we always speak before I get them, so they tell me their goals. And, whenever we have, usually it's coming like to a new meet, so, all right, what's your goal? New year, what's your goal? And I just try to manage them based off what their goals are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you, a great question from Jenny Brown. She asked, and this is one of those ones that's because jockeys are independent agents, right? They're
independent.
Yeah, they're independent contractors. If you get a call tomorrow, and let's say, we'll make it a hypothetical. Somebody calls and says, "Hey, Lane Luzzy, a trainer calls, I want you to ride in the Haskell tomorrow, a place where he's not based." Who pays for Lane's travel expenses to go ride?
It's generally the connections of the horse.
Yep.
Yeah, generally the connections of the horse will.
Yep. It and so that falls into it. Does that fall into your bucket to negotiate, or how does that?
No, there's a guy named Walter Johnson who he's pretty up high in that. He was the guy who handled it when my dad was riding since I was a child. So, and he still does all that now, and he handles all the billing out and all of that.
Gotcha.
It's not something I have to handle myself.
No, not at all. What expenses, are there anything on the expense side of a jockey that you do get involved with, or is most of that not in your responsibility?
Like, I take care of the food for the barns,
Mm-hmm.
when we win a race, stuff like that.
Gotcha.
But outside of that, no, it's separated.
Interesting. So what if we fast forward, 15, 20 years from now, and you're still very early in your career path, 15, 20 years from now, we fast forward, what does what you're doing look like? And what does being a jockey agent look like? And what does Santos Inc. look like 15, 20 years from now?
Like I said, I'd love to get into the management of stables, but really bloodstock has some interest to me. I just don't know a lot about it, but not even, I think a lot of it is like, I don't have to be the one doing it. I feel like I can hire people on that's like under the work umbrella, of the company is the way I see it when it comes to things like bloodstock and racing management, kind of like work under the name of it. And then we collaborate on clients and ideas and stuff like that. And as of jockey agents, I think it's going to look a lot like what I'm doing now. I feel like there's a lot of young people that are interested in horse racing right now. And they definitely are interested in the agent side of it because it's interesting. People are interested in sports and what sports agents do, and it seems like a fun thing to do, and it really is. I enjoy it a lot. It's constant action for me. I'm always involved in something, and I find that a lot of fun. And I think more people are going to get into it that way, especially once younger people become agents. Like, they're going to see me doing it and say, well, I can do that, and they can. All you have to do is work at it.
Yeah. Could you envision taking on an apprentice agent?
Yeah, most definitely. I'd say that at least two of the people who work for me now want to be an agent. So they're hopefully learning from, what they're doing with me. I think they are. I'm around them a lot. So
sure. It made me think of a question. In an average morning, how many phone calls are you getting on an average morning?
It gets up there, probably about 30 to 40,
Yep.
and
Yep.
then a bunch of text messaging as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Do any of your, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do any of your trainers use anything, any other communication platform besides texting or making a phone call to you? Do you talk to anybody else in any other way?
Yeah, Twitter.
Twitter. I
Yeah,
gotcha.
Twitter, I would say, but yeah, it's mainly just phone calls and texting. But yeah, there's some trainers that are active on Twitter as well.
Yeah. Chris asked a question, and I know this has been on social media as a hot topic with Carl Broberg, but have you ever thought about a straight salary type of arrangement instead of the percentage?
Not really, but I mean, I'd be open to it based off, if I thought it'd be beneficial for the both of us.
Yeah. So
I wouldn't be against it.
yeah, I think that's what makes you special too, is that you don't come in with saying that it's got to be this way. You're open to sort of thinking about those sort of things.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely. And just like any good contract, if you exceeded the expectation of the salary, I'm sure there'd be some kind of compensation for that, based off percentages. So I'd definitely be open to having this kind of conversation.
Holly asked the question. This is sort of going back, but it's interesting. And it's just an informative thing because the draw for a card is an interesting process. What and it's not. And once again, it might be one of those things that somebody who's even a horse racing fan doesn't even understand. What happens at the draw, and then the follow-up question to that, as an agent, what are you doing at that draw to sort of to do your job? So
Okay.
two pieces to that.
Yeah, so we draw the races quite literally. They'll put papers into a box with all the horses' information, and then they'll put pills into like a pill shaker, pull out one of the numbers, pull out one of the papers. This horse is going to be the 7. This next one, that's the 3. And they match up the pills, of course, with the amount of papers in the box. And then my job during that, if anybody's doubled, I'll reach out to the agent who, is doubled. If I'm open, can one of my riders ride this horse? I try not to reach out to the trainers directly unless like I know it's a situation that, that trainer just named on the rider and they are handling their own business. Most of the time, if an agent's named on the horse, they've handled that business, and I'm gonna try to go directly through them. I don't want to disrespect their situation or be breaking news to somebody that, they didn't know prior. I don't want to get anybody in trouble that way. And also paying attention to what if my horse has gotten to the race, because there's there's situations where there's a certain amount of spots and a certain amount of horses entered, and hopefully you get in the race. So, just relaying that information off to the trainers so they know what's going on right away as well.
Mm-hmm. And during a draw, is there how much are you communicating out to your jockeys right at that moment, or do you wait sort of till a card's done and then communicate? How, just from a timing standpoint, how do you do it?
My riders kind of just communicate to me whenever they need, whenever they feel it's necessary. I'm going to answer the phone, and it's the same with me. Usually it's just, after the races, though, in most cases. After and before the races, generally.
Do you thinking about strategizing a race with a jockey, how much, because you like to handicap, how much do you strategize specific races with jockeys, or do you mostly leave that to the jockeys? How do you say, hey, this one, I think it's got to, you got to get to the lead here, or how much do you get involved in that personally, or do you stay out of that?
I stay out of it for the most part unless I'm asked.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to know my opinion, then I'm more than happy to give it. But same way they trust me to do my job without really bothering me, I try my best to trust them with the same.
Do you have jockeys who are, and I would think especially with younger jockeys, if you're working with an apprentice or not, or something, How often are jockeys bad handicappers and that hurts them, and you actually help there? Because
I've had that in the past for sure, but not every rider I work with, I think I'm extremely lucky. I work with people who really, really are paying attention to what's going on, whether it be track biases, trends on horses, and paying attention to the racing form. I currently am everyone I work with extremely well prepared. I'm very fortunate in that. That's for sure.
How much do your jocks watch replays? How do replays play in?
Every single one of my riders watches replays for sure.
Yeah. And are they doing that day of, day before? What
I'd say day of.
Day
I'd say
of?
they're probably looking at a day of. That's what I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had a situation with your jocks where you feel like you need to coach them? Like they're in a rut, it's not going well, and you feel like you can help there. How do you think about that?
Most definitely, if I can tell somebody's down, I'll do whatever I need to, help lift their spirits, or if I see something that they're doing repetitively, then I'm like, that's probably not going to work out. I'll definitely bring it up. Hopefully they don't get offended. No one has in the situations I've done it, and it's been rarely, but if I see something, I'll definitely try to mention it to them.
If you could, and I've got just one question left, and so if you could change one thing in racing, not necessarily about being a jock or a jock agent or any of that, but if I gave you a magic wand and said, hey, just wave the magic wand and this gets fixed, what would be that you would fix, and how would you fix it?
I think that timing systems, it's ridiculous that they don't work all the time, and there should be like a shutter camera at every finish line. It's not at every racetrack. I don't really understand why, but that's how it should be everywhere.
Yeah, there is a lot of discussion on Twitter lately about the timing, and
like it's just like, why would that? It's no other sport does that happen, and like in most other countries it doesn't happen. So like, why does it happen here? Like, for instance, my dad's from Chile, so I watch horse racing in Chile a lot. It's on the Gulfstream or the Laurel feed. Like, the times are done perfectly, and there'll never be a wrong call on a photo finish. Like, it should just be that way everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I've lost enough noses that I wish it was everywhere now.
Right.
So yeah.
I mean, why it sucks that it's even in question, like it shouldn't be in question at all. Like, we have that technology.
Yeah, it is a fairly easy fix.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Couple cameras and new timing systems.
Yeah. If middle school track teams can figure this out, I'm pretty sure we can figure it out. That's what I said. That's what I said on Twitter the other day. I was like, if the middle school track teams can figure it out, we should be able to figure it out.
I agree.
So, Mr. Josue, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you. I
awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you all for joining as well. I hope I was some form of help. And I appreciate all the questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you were fantastic, man. We'll and I'll pick you offline. We'll talk about some other ideas I got for you.
Sounds good. You all have a nice day.
All right. See you, buddy.